All right, let's just get right into it. There is nothing, and I mean nothing, more frustrating than loading up your washer, hitting that start button, and bam, you get hit with some cryptic error code. Well, today we are cracking one of the most common and honestly one of the most confusing for all you LG owners out there, the dreaded CE error. So if you're staring at those two little letters flashing on your washer's display right now, don't worry. You are in exactly the right place. We are going to break down what this error actually means, and then we'll walk through a step-by-step diagnostic to get you back to having clean clothes again. So, what even is the CE error? Well, think of it like this. Your washer's main computer, that's the PCB or the main board, and its motor. They're supposed to be in constant communication. The CE error is basically a handshake failure. The brain of the machine has totally lost its connection to the muscle. They've just stopped talking to each other, and for safety, the whole machine just shuts down. Now, this is really, really important. You've got to distinguish this from the LE error. They might seem similar, but they're totally different problems. The CE error, that's a communication issue. It's an electronics problem, a brain problem. The LE error, on the other hand, that's a motor overload problem. Usually it's because of a super heavy load or some other mechanical issue. That's a muscle problem. And trust me, different causes mean completely different fixes, so getting this right from the very beginning is absolutely key. Okay, before we even think about breaking out the tools, let's start with the absolute simplest steps. Think of these as the quick wins, the things that could solve this whole problem right now without you having to take a single thing apart. First up is the full power cycle, and I mean a full one. You have to physically unplug the washer from the wall outlet. Don't just turn it off with a button, that won't cut it. Now, go grab a cup of coffee or something because you need to wait at least 10 full minutes. Seriously. This gives the capacitors on the control board enough time to fully discharge and reset any little electronic glitches. After 10 minutes, plug it back into a properly grounded outlet and see if that pesky error is gone. All right, so if the reset didn't work, it's time to put on our detective hats. We're moving on to what I like to call a visual inspection of the crime scene. We're going to look for obvious physical evidence of what went wrong. And the best part? You don't need any special tools for this part, just your eyes. So there are three main spots we need to check out. First, we're going to look at the motor connector, which is at the back of the washer. Second, we'll check the main control board, the PCB. And third, the motor stator itself. These 3 points are where our handshake failure is most likely to have started. Okay, with the washer unplugged and the back panel off, zoom in on that motor connector. What you're looking for here is any sign of heat damage. We're talking charred, burned, or even melted plastic. This white connector is a super, super common failure point. See, a bad connection here creates high resistance, which generates a ton of heat, and that heat melts the plastic, completely severing that communication line. This, right here, is the smoking gun in a whole lot of CE error cases. And finding that burned connector, that's a huge clue. This chart shows exactly why it's so important to check. Sure, a failed mainboard or PCB is the most likely culprit at around 40% of the time, but look what's next. That burned connector and a failed hall sensor, which we'll test in a bit, together they account for another 45% of cases. This is why our visual check is so important. It helps us narrow down the most probable causes right away. All right, visual inspection is done. If you didn't find any obvious burn marks, it's time to dig a little deeper. Now we're going to interrogate the components. And for that, we'll need a multimeter to get the real story from the electronics themselves. We're going to start with the motor's hall sensors. These little things are what tell the mainboard about the position of the motor. So first things first, make sure the washer is unplugged. Then disconnect that motor connector and set your multimeter to test for resistance. That's the ohm setting. It looks like a little horseshoe. From there, you'll test the resistance between the specific pins for the sensors. So what are you looking for? Well, a healthy sensor should give you a reading somewhere in the ballpark of 500 to 2,000 ohms. But the exact number isn't actually the most important piece of information here. What's really telling is the comparison. Are the readings from all three of the sensors pretty close to each other? Consistency is everything here. So let's say two of your sensors read around 1,000 ohms, but the third one reads 50 ohms, or it's completely open. Well, guess what? You've just found your problem. A big difference like that points directly to a failed sensor. Next up, let's move on to the motor windings themselves. Keep your multimeter set to ohms. You're going to test the resistance between each of the three phases. After that, there's a really crucial safety check. You have to test each phase to the metal casing of the stator.
This checks for a short to ground, which is a very, very serious failure. For the windings, you should see a really low resistance, usually somewhere between 2 and 10 ohms. And just like with the sensors, the key is that they should all be within about half an ohm of each other. Now, if you get a reading of OL, or 0, between one of the windings and the middle housing, that means the motor is shorted out, and it absolutely has to be replaced. No two ways about it.
Okay, you've done the hard part. You've run the diagnostics, you've gathered your evidence. Now comes the final stage, analyzing what you found and looking at the potential costs to decide, do you fix this machine or is it time to fold and buy a new one? And this right here is a critical point that you have to remember. The motor and the main board are a linked system. They depend on each other. A short in the motor can totally fry the control board, and a failing control board can send bad signals that damage the motor. It's a two-way street. That's why if you find one bad part, it is absolutely vital that you test its counterpart before you go ordering anything. Okay, let's talk money, because that's what it all comes down to, right? This chart breaks down what you might be looking at. As you can see, a DIY repair on just one of the major components, like the PCB or the stator, is going to run you a few $100s plus several hours of your own time. But if both have failed, whoa, now you're looking at a pretty significant investment. And then compare that to a professional repair, which can get really close to the cost of a brand new machine really fast. So how do you make the call? Well, here's a pretty good rule of thumb to follow. You should probably only go ahead with a repair if the total cost, and that includes parts, plus whatever you value your time at, is less than 60% of what it would cost to buy a new, similar washer. I mean, think about it. If the repair is going to cost you $700 and a brand new machine is $1,000, well, it might be time to start shopping. And hey, let's be real for a second. DIY is not always the answer. If your washer is still under warranty, especially that awesome 10-year motor warranty that LG has, just stop what you're doing right now and call them. If your tests show that multiple parts have failed, if you're just not comfortable doing these kinds of tests, or if your results just don't make any sense, calling a professional is by far the smartest and safest move. So there you have it. You've gone from staring at a confusing error code to conducting a full-blown diagnostic. You understand the suspects, you know how to interrogate them, and now you have the hard data you need to make an informed decision. You have officially cracked the case of the CE error. The only question left is, what's your next move going to be?